I want to start with the words that for me it is really very demanding to speak about Ukrainian poetry here at Liber. As far as I understand, that the event is absolutely professional. And let's be really frank, not so many people in the world read poetry. Poetry is very important, and we often speak about poetry in connection with humanism, in connection with the idea of liberal democracy, but at the same time, at any society, poetry is not something that is super popular. But I really believe that contemporary Ukrainian poetry is a good way to understand contemporary Ukraine. And today I just want to dive with you in this world of Ukrainian poetry, to speak about poetry as a testimony, but also as a way to understand Ukrainian character. And I think that we will have around 40-45 minutes for my speech, and then I will be super open to your questions and also to any comments from your side. Today I want to dive a bit in the history, first of all in the history of 20th century in Ukraine, but just a bit to get the context done. And then we will speak about 4 Ukrainian poets, and also we will speak a bit about the specific point when contemporary Ukrainian literature starts. When I was preparing to this event, it was really puzzling for me, like how can we speak about poetry at a professional event? But I was thinking about T.C. Eliot, who wrote that the world will end not in an active way. Yes, he wrote that world ends not with a bang, but a whimper. And it is an important thing with poetry because we never know when poetry disappears from our lives and how it influences us as human beings. If we became like those hollow people, yes, hollow people from hollow land. I speak from a country and culture where there is ongoing Russian invasion, and my colleague Inna Bilonoshko, before she spoke just perfectly about our context and about the literary landscape in general. And I want just to give you some figures to imagine this literary context right now in Ukraine. These are the fresh figures from our Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, like from 25th September of 2025. We know that till that day, Russia damaged or completely destroyed 1,599 cultural heritage sites in Ukraine and 2,415 objects of cultural infrastructure. Only in Kharkiv, which is called the capital of publishing industry in Ukraine, 341 objects was damaged. We know that hundreds of libraries have been damaged or destroyed today, and that really influences literary landscape right now because we understand how fragile it is. Why we speak today about poetry? We speak about poetry because it is, on the one hand, the fastest way to react to reality, and on the other way, poetry is something that can be written under any conditions. When there are wars, when people are imprisoned, when people are sent to any kind of deep camps, they still write poetry. And even now, poetry is a testimony of our reality, but it was like that before. And it is not only the Ukrainian case, it is like global case. Poetry is something that fixates the reality for us. And I want to give you several cases from 20th century, especially just to give you these glasses that I use when I'm looking at Ukrainian poetry. And I was rereading recently Timothy Snyder, his Bloodlands, the book from 2010, a brilliant history book, which I strongly recommend you if you haven't read it, which rediscovers the European history of 20th century. And probably the main thing that Timothy Snyder writes there is that the totalitarian regime of Stalin's Russia was the same as Hitler's Germany. They were destructive in the same way. But there is a very big difference in these regimes, because we know that Nazi Germany was defeated and that it faced some kind of justice. Of course, there are irreparable losses, and especially when we speak about the lives of authors, these losses are completely irreparable. But at the same time, the Stalin's regime crimes have been never punished. And that influenced not only Ukraine, but the big world of what we call right now Central Europe. There are different cultures and different literatures that were silenced, forced to be silent, just because they wanted to speak the truth. It is the whole big conversation about colonialism, but right now I just want to emphasize this to make this point that that's why we sometimes don't know some of the names which people from Poland, Czech Republic, Ukraine, Romania, and in other countries consider to be the main names of their cultures. And it is very specific hybrid situation right now because we have this possibility to discover the names. Of course, it is very different than if when you discover the names when they just appear, when they influence the national culture. But still, it is very important to get these narratives, at least right now, to understand the cultures. And there is one really super topical case about Ukrainian literature from 20th century, which you probably heard of if you heard something about Ukrainian culture. It is the generation which was called Ukrainian Renaissance. If we try to find some analogies in world literature, I think that everybody remembers this interwar modernism, which was mainly active in Paris, which we call the lost generation, Génération perdue. And executed Renaissance is something very close, but the context is completely different. This anthology was compiled in Europe and published in, right after the Stalin's death in 1959, several years after the Stalin's death. And the main idea of the compiler of this anthology, Yuri Lavrinenko, was to show that there was a literature, and this literature was good enough and interesting enough. He understood that probably at home at Ukrainian Soviet Republic, none of these names that are under this cover can be published and probably will never be published again. But he understood that publishing and making this book is his only way to bring justice, just a bit. To try to understand the main narratives that were present in Ukrainian modernist literature. We see here that the year from where he starts is 1917. It is the year when the struggles for Ukrainian revolution, for Ukrainian fight of independence were at the very high point. And then he ends with like early Soviet literature, early Soviet Ukrainian literature, which still kept this, Ukrainian scholars call it cultural sovereignty. And this is a very devastating example because we understand that the compiler of such kind of anthology, he understands very clearly that probably his country will never gain independence again. Probably people will never be able to write again in Ukrainian language in the aesthetics which they choose for themselves. They will never be able to publish what they want. He knows the outcomes of Stalin's terror. And I just want to give you again some figures. In the beginning of this slide, you see the quote from Yuri Lavrinenko from this anthology about the writers and their destinies, like how many people died in Stalin's terror. In general, the situation was like that, that the best voices were silenced by sentence, by death, or they were made to change their aesthetics completely. Only a few people were left alive, mainly because they emigrated outside of Ukraine. This numbers really give us the idea of the circumstances which appear to Ukrainian poetry in the half and second half of 20th century. But also on the right side of this slide you see another anthology which is super popular in Ukraine. It is like this thick book, and it is the anthology of Ukrainian poetry of 20th century. And right now I want to speak a bit about poetry, justice, and dignity, how poetry brings us dignity back. The compiler of this anthology, his name is Ivan Malkovich, and he understood that he needs to propose the readership in Ukraine a non-socialistic canon of poetry, and to show that there was tradition, and this tradition was kept even under the gravest circumstances. And the possibility to keep the tradition was poetry. Because we understand very well here that novels, that fiction needs infrastructure. Virginia Woolf wrote that you need the room of your own to write, and female writers understand that very well, but it works really for everybody. You need this room and place to write, and you need circumstances that allow you publish your writing. But poetry can be written in underground. Many people wrote poetry knowing that they will never be published. And that was really the reality that brings us to 1991 when Ukraine regains independence. But I started with the idea of contemporary Ukrainian poetry, and I was asking myself, when contemporary Ukrainian poetry starts? When we speak about these starting points, we often speak about big and usually tragic events. And really, it always works like that in literature, I feel. Sometimes it is something very beautiful, but very often it is about the very grave change of aesthetics. And right now, I want to start from Vasyl Stus, Ukrainian writer, from the generation of 60s. He has been translated into English vastly in last years, and his life is the example of the life of Ukrainian poet in 20th century. Vasyl Stus was a poet of modernist aesthetics, and he started as a very ironical, a bit cynical, a bit romantic young poet in Soviet Ukraine. But very fast he became closer with dissident circles, and of course this made a huge impact on his life. He has been sentenced for 2 terms, and he was serving his sentences very far from his home, His last sentence, unfortunately, led to his murder and death under circumstances that we still do need to discover, but of course we don't have enough access to Russian archives. Why it is important to speak about Vasil Stus? Because he was he died in the dawn of perestroika. Right now we speak often about perestroika as about the period of probably something new and democratic in Russia. But definitely the situation is different. It is one of the most important Ukrainian voices of the second half of 20th century. And he was also made to silence. His death can be considered as a starting point for contemporary Ukrainian literature, because after that starts perestroika and people get a bit more space for their free writing and free publishing. Here you can see the Samizdat book by Vasil Stus, which was an evidence at a trial against him in 1972. Vasil Stus is important for our conversation because right now there is a renaissance of interest to classic literature and classic poetry in Ukraine. And also it is the case which shows us that the life of Ukrainian language poet was a protest life in the reality of Soviet Union. Just because you decided to write in Ukrainian, you also chose this dangerous kind of life. Unfortunately, Vasil Stus is still not translated enough into foreign languages, and he is not such a big part of international discourse, but also his interests show us, for instance, his connections with Spanish literature or Spanish poetry. Because even when he was in the labor camp, he was translating, for instance, Federico Garcia Lorca. Stus was translating a lot when he spent his sentence in the Russian imprisonment. And also Vasil Stus gives us this idea of what it is to be a poet in Ukraine in that time. Also today I want to give you the portraits of three another Ukrainian poets who are very different in aesthetics, but who share quite similar life today. They all three are part of Ukrainian military, but they volunteered to military and they changed their life completely. I want to start from Serhiy Zhadan, who has been translated into Spanish. Spanish audience is acquainted with his literature, and I think that his life is very important to understand the contemporary poetry, as Serhiy debuts in Ukrainian literature several years after the death of Vasil Stus. It is in early 90s when his first poetry collection appears. Serhiy Zhadan was well known as kind of even anarchist poet in the beginning of his career. He was always about freedom of expression, he was always about urbanism, he was considered to be this bard of post-colonial space where people need to feel that they own something, that they own their country, that they own their culture. But when we follow his life and his books after the Revolution of Dignity and after the beginning of Russian war against Ukraine in 2014, we see how his life changes. And it is really very interesting to discover this in the life of people who write. Because right away he is starting to volunteer, first of all, for the army, for the military. He goes to the frontline cities to discover how do people live there, how their life changes in the frontline cities. And right away he writes about war that appears here in his homeland. He is from the eastern part of the country. Right now he resides in Kharkiv, but he is from Luhansk region. And it is important for him to show why this territory is Ukrainian land. And he does this with poetry and with novels. Probably the best way to discover this topic is to read his novel Orphanage. It is translated Orphanage into English. To understand how the war influenced Ukraine between 2014 and 2022. And last year there was a really big news. Serhiy Zhadan was constantly volunteering for the Ukrainian military. He stayed in Kharkiv even after the full war started. But then he decided also to volunteer to the army. He joined the brigade Khartiya, which is the Kharkiv brigade, the brigade of his city, because he told that he needs to be part of the story as a whole. He needs to join the military to be as active as possible right now. And it was also the specific thing in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, because I remember very well when there were so many possibilities to Ukrainian writer to go abroad for any kind of residence, scholarship, or to somehow get to international audience. And so many of Ukrainian writers decided not to do this because they understood that right now they need to be here with their people to witness what happens to their country and also to testify about that. And that's also the story of Serhiy Zhadan. Here I have several photos to speak about the, how to say, the poetical culture reality in Ukraine. Because last year Serhiy Zhadan, he gathered several thousand of people to his poetic readings. It is in the city center of Kyiv. It is called the Palace of Sports. And many people right now in Ukraine just need poetry. We may find different metaphors. Why do they need poetry? It can be kind of a prayer. It can be kind of a conversation. Very often it is the internal conversation with yourself, something that you cannot speak about even with your closest people, or if you lost your closest people, you still have poetry. And poetry, as, how to say, the highest register of language, gives us this possibility. But of course it is really, I would say, it is very inspiring even to understand that right now during air raids, during the full war, Ukrainians need poetry so much. Right now Serhiy Zhadan is one of the best translated Ukrainian writers to bear the testimonies about the reality of the frontline territories. Because when it comes to big wars, very often the lives of concrete people and emotions are underrated. And poets understand that they need to keep their focus on the importance of very personal individual emotions. The second poet that I want to introduce you is Yarina Chornogus. Yarina Chornogus is right now 30 years old, and she is a philologist. She studied at Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, which is the oldest university in Ukraine, and her grandfather is a famous Ukrainian writer and editor. But several years before the full-scale invasion in 2020, Yarina decided to join the Ukrainian military because she believed that Russia will not stop, that even if she likes literature, poetry, and this beautiful life that good poetry brings to us, she needs to be the part of the bigger story. And she volunteered to the army. Right now she is also the part of the military. Last year she was awarded the highest award in Ukraine, Taras Shevchenko Award, for her recent poetry collection, Design. And it is interesting to speak about such people. Like, she is very young. She was brought with the idea of individualism and individual freedom. She hasn't witnessed the Soviet reality. But she understands this importance of taking responsibility for your country, for your language, for your people. At the same time, I want to speak to you about what does she do right now in Ukraine, and even when she is serving in the East and different other parts of the country. This is, by the way, her poetry collection, which has just been published in English, and I strongly recommend you to read about it more. But right now, Yarina Chernoghuz, for example, studies French language to be able to speak to her French audience, and also she translates the poetry of Sylvia Plath. There will be the brand new translation of Sylvia Plath into Ukrainian of her book Ariel, and Yarina does this when she has the breaks from being a combat medic. It is a very specific kind of reality for Ukrainian poets because we all are used to the reality of beautiful literary festivals in Europe. We Ukrainians also do remember such festivals when you have so much freedom, when you have so much possibility to show something very specific within the poetry, because poetry, good poetry, is always an experiment. And right now, Ukrainian poets decide to change their lives and to impact so much their freedom, but for something they consider is connected with writing poetry. The final example for today is probably one of the youngest voices of Ukrainian poetry, and I also strongly recommend you to get to know him. His name is Artur Dronj, and right now he is 24. He joined the military in 2022 when he was only 21 years old. So you probably know that in Ukraine the age of conscription is 25. So he managed to become a veteran of Russian-Ukrainian war even before getting to this age of conscription. And he writes very interesting poetry. Inna told, with those of you who attended her event, that right now it is very important for Ukrainian writers to fixate, to document. And his poetry collection, which is called, in English, it is called We Were Here, like also this statement that we were on this land, is the poetic collection of testimonies that he got from his comrades, from the people he was fighting with, fighting together. Some of those people, unfortunately, sacrificed their lives in this battle. Also, right now, Artur has published a brand new collection of short stories and essays with very interesting title, which is called Hemingway Knows Nothing. In Ukraine, we are rediscovering a lot of classics and a lot of writers that were writing about different wars from different times, like from Homer and his Iliad till nowadays, till Balkan Wars, till wars of Russia against Chechens, and so on. And Artur said once that he understood that Hemingway, who is a canonic writer, when we speak about writing about wars, when we speak about Ukrainian war of Russia against Ukraine, Hemingway knows nothing, because it is one of the tendencies I also wanted to emphasize today. That Ukrainian authors who join the military, and there are dozens and dozens of the best voices who decide to do this, they do this because the enemy comes to their country, and they understand that there is a very direct connection between language and war. If the enemy comes to your country and says that there is no such a country and no such a language, you as a writer will not be able to survive, because you continue to write in Ukrainian language. And it is very different than we speak about the authors who go abroad to see the war, to witness the war, which is very important, but the general idea is completely different. Why do you do this? And that also influences the poetry as such. I also wanted to speak a bit about the general tendencies, and it is the huge interest to reading and a kind of flourishing in Ukrainian publishing industry. At the same time, we have constant shellings of this industry, but what we feel in Ukraine is the big demand to reading. It can be explained very simple, because when we try to think about, for instance, Susan Sontag, who went to Sarajevo, to Balkans, she wrote about people who were making theater performances there. And it sounds difficult to imagine, even ridiculous in a way, like when you are constantly shelled, why do you need theater? But you need theater to feel that you are still a human being. And it is the same with literature and reading in Ukraine. The readership flourishes because when a person gets a hard copy of a book, especially of a new book, especially published, for instance, in Kharkiv, he or she understands that even under the worst conditions, you are still a human being, and you have kind of aspirations, you have dreams, you want something more than only survival. Survival is super important right now in Ukraine, and we understand it every night when Kyiv is shelled, for example. But at the same time, you always want something more, and you have this demand to understand why your identity is an enemy identity for the enemy of yours. Also, we still have new festivals in Ukraine. And what is very interesting is that those festivals are not only in the cities in the western part of the country, which is considered to be a bit safer, but also there are new festivals in Mykolaiv, in Kharkiv, even readings in Kherson. People stay there, and people want to feel that they live a full life. It is important for them, and literature gives this feeling of fullness. I wanted to say also about the initiatives of civil society, because it is another tendency that we can follow right now, and it can be important for publishers or literary agents. At the one point, we really got a lot of initiatives connected with libraries, because many of the libraries were shelled, and also many of the libraries were filled with really old books. And when people were going to places closer to front line, they understood that they wanted to fill the libraries with new books. PEN Ukraine, which is part of PEN International, fills the libraries with books, but also Ukrainian influencers and people who just understand the power of literature constantly fundraise for new books to libraries, because they understand that there are kids that will read these books, but also there are people who decide to stay at their homes, and they need this feeling of safety that literature provides to us. Also, there are several initiatives that keep the memory. It is another important topic right now to speak in Ukraine. And there is, for instance, the initiative that is called People of Culture Taken Away by the War. When the full war started, we understood that we need to make a very clear record of cultural losses. And I started with you from these figures, brand new figures of Ministry of Culture of Ukraine, but also it is super important to tell the stories of people who were working in creative and cultural industries. They decided on a separate period to join the military, and then we lost them, because those are the losses that we are not able to repair. Also, there is a very important project which is called the Unwritten, which is dedicated only to poetry and only to people who wrote poetry. It is conducted by Yevhen Lir and Olena Gerasimyuk, who are both poets, who are both writers, and who are both parts of Ukrainian military. And they feel that it is their responsibility to tell the stories and to give some light to poetic voices of those people who are not able right now just to speak for them. There are many of voices that we will be not able to hear again, and it is a very factual reality that any kind of war brings, that you lose the finest voices, you lose the bravest people, you lose the people who are the most frank. But at the same time, that's how we understand that poetry really explains us which kind of the country is Ukraine and which kind of the country Ukraine was before. Because we can follow the traces of the ideas, we can follow the traces of poetic interests, we can follow even the prohibitions of language, of publishing industry. Also, we follow the trends, and we understand what is interesting for the readers. Poets show what is important to them, but I believe that readers show us the real trends and show us the power of literature right now. Also, readers show us that poetry has a very specific humanistic value right now when there is ongoing war. And it is difficult to propose any kind of fiction about war right away. Still, we have good examples of war fiction in Ukraine, especially between 2014 and 2022. But poetry really documents the emotions for us, and that is something that we can propose you, and that is a place where you might find some kind of empathy to understand this reality of ongoing war in Ukraine. I really believe that poetry is the thing that helps us feel that we are not alone, and at different points of Ukrainian history, poetry dealt with this loneliness. I think that we have so many poetic stories to discover about each other, about our countries. And I think that this conversation is only starting. So I'm really glad today to speak to you about the contemporary situation with poetry in Ukraine, but also to help you trace the recent history of poetry in Ukraine. And I think that at this point we really can move to any kind of questions, comments, and also if you want to share any kind of the thoughts, I'm very open to this because it will be the most fruitful part probably. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours. Thank you. I think that we have like several seconds, and you might think if you have any kind of questions, or also I might dwell upon any kind of the topics that were briefly covered here and that you want to know more about it. Anything from your side? Yes.
You have been talking about several things that civil society are doing to support Ukrainian culture. But I have been reading also about how many new bookstores are opening in Ukraine, especially in Kiev, supporting also poetry, but literature, history. Mm-hmm. Can you tell something about that, please?
Thank you. The question is really excellent because I remember how it was, especially before the pandemic of COVID. I used to work at Ukrainian Book Institute, which is the institution of cultural diplomacy. And when we were going to different fairs, to different European, especially cities, I really was surprised with this infrastructure of bookstores because it is the place of gathering of readers, and it is super important for readers to have this place. And right now it's really different in Ukraine. We even covered it for The Guardian, and I really it's said that I don't have a screenshot right here, but there is a cultural commentator from The Guardian. Her name is Charlotte Higgins, and she came to Kyiv. It was the time when we had constant blackouts in Kyiv, but there were many new bookshops, and she wanted to cover the bookshops and people who come to see that. I think that there are several dozens of new places across Ukraine, and it is also important to say there are places, for example, in Dnipro, in Kharkiv, which are really heavily shelled constantly, where people also come to speak, come to buy books, and just to spend some time. Also, bookstores are the places of remembrance and memory because there are people who dreamt to open a bookstore. It is a real story of a friend of mine. His name is Mykola Rachok. He also volunteered to military, and he died in action near Bakhmut. But he was a philologist, and he had a dream to open a bookstore, and his older sister, she decided to open this bookstore in the memory of his, to make it very similar to a home library. So right now in Ukraine, it is on the one hand also the outcome of COVID, I believe, and I think that you have this feeling in Spain that right now we value so much the possibility to speak to one another, not in Zoom, but like now, alive. But also war showed us that it is important to meet in person. And bookstores give this possibility, and often bookstores right now are, I would say, like interdisciplinary places. There are places for events, but they also serve coffee. It is a place where you can get some food, like what we call the third places of the cities. And it influences the general literary culture in Ukraine, because even if you go to have a cup of good coffee to a bookstore and you don't buy books, but you drink this coffee surrounded by the books. And that influences the culture of reading so much in Ukraine right now. I just hope that we will be able to keep this, because it is difficult and the books are getting more expensive, because first of all, most of the paper is bought from abroad, and it is brought to Ukraine to be published in the to get the books published. But also we have this really tragedy of constant shellings of publishing facilities. There are some new publishing facilities in the western part of the country, but the main publishing facilities still stay in Kharkiv because it is just impossible to replace them. And that also influences the price of the book as an object. But the places are super important. Thank you for the question. Yeah. Yes.
Hello. First of all, thanks for your presentation. I wanted to make two comments on two different things. Harking back to that idea of the bookstores that you were talking about, very recently I had the opportunity to visit Valencia, and I saw that there was a new bookshop of Ukrainian literature. But I was very sad because all the books were only in Ukrainian. And I felt like one of the, I mean, it's weird to say, but of the positive outcomes of this war might be that Ukrainian literature can feel, we can feel that it is a good moment for Ukrainian literature. And I wanted to ask you about if there is any kind of situation where translations are not possible because there are not enough translators, or because maybe this situation is quite new for Ukrainian literature. And secondly, something that you said that I really liked about Susan Sontag in the Balkans during the war, and about saying that people needed theater. It reminded me of something that happened here in Spain during the Civil War, Spanish Civil War, when Madrid, the capital, was being bombed almost every night by Franco. And he knew that I think it was 8 o'clock, people were leaving the theaters. So if he bombed at that time, there would be more victims. So people still wanted to go to the theaters, and they knew that they could go and leave 10 minutes earlier. So they didn't see the end of the play, probably the best part, but it didn't matter because they still wanted to go. And I think there's that connection with what you said on Ukrainian cities, where people need culture, literature, probably theater, although Ukraine is being bombed almost every day. And those are the two comments I wanted to say with the question.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much for the comment, a brilliant comment really, and you're totally right when we speak about the translations. Like, we all understand that we all need to translate. It is, I think that we need the separate conversation about the artificial intelligence and how it influences the reality of translators' market right now. But definitely right now we have more translations from Ukrainian into different languages. But it is the question of Slavonic studies across the world. And the Slavonic studies were not Slavonic studies as such. They were Soviet studies before, and right now there are so many people who are still experts in, first of all, Russian literature and Russian language. And that is not bad, it is just the matter of fact, because many of those people who were very good translators from Russian, they decided to learn Ukrainian language, and I know many of those, and right now they translate from Ukrainian also. But it is something that switches not so fast, because it is academia, and academia cannot be so fast. So definitely we need those culture bridges, and I also feel that we need more translations from Spanish language, because I was speaking about Vasil Stus, and actually he was translating Lorca with the help of his friend Yuri Pokalchuk. Yuri Pokalchuk, by the way, is very important to the organizers of Ukrainian Stand, but I won't dwell into this topic. But Yuri Pokalchuk was a translator from Spanish, and he did like basic translations for Stus, and then Stus was making the poetic finals. But we need more translations just to understand each other, because what you are speaking about civil war in your country, I ask myself, how much do I know about this? Because this is a recent history, and this influences your country, and we just need more. But there are several projects which are very important to mention, and one of them is brand new. It is called Chapter Ukraine. You may find the QR code at a Ukrainian stand. There you will find the translations from Ukrainian into English. It is not enough because we need to have a project which will show us translations into Spanish, Italian, and so on, but it is the beginning. And I just hope that there will be more and more people who want to discover Ukrainian literature, because also it is important to mention another great author, Sofia Andruchovich. She constantly says right now that it is important to understand that there is war in Ukraine, but Ukrainian stories are much bigger than war. Like, we don't need to make them as small as war. People have their lives and they're bigger. The second question or comment of yours is very interesting, I think, for Ukrainian audience that I see here, but also for Spanish audience here, international audience, because it is about the idea that dictators of any country, they do the same. They are really the same, and when we speak about, I will move back briefly to Vasil Stus, so we will just look at him. But in the times of Vasil Stus, it was like normal to go to people's homes at 4 a.m. because people were sleeping at 4 a.m. And when you take a person at 4 a.m. from his or her home, the person feels very... it is very difficult to protest in any way at this situation, but that's also what was done, for instance, in the times of Stalin's terror. But right now I live in Kyiv and we are constantly bombed at 4 a.m. So I think that Russians really get this thing, like when the people are the most fragile. And at the same time, it is the question of focus. And when we speak about theater and when we speak about any kind of culture, the question is if we focus on the outcomes of the bombing or if we focus on why do people go to theaters. And that changes completely everything. So I just thank you so much for this point. Probably you have any other comments or questions, because I feel that we have several minutes left. And if you don't have any comments or questions, I will be open to any kind of conversation at Ukrainian stand. I will spend some time there. But I also thank you so much that you came to this event about Ukrainian contemporary poetry in the reality of war. It is difficult to speak about this because when you really have 1 hour, you understand that you need to speak about the reality that we have right now, but also you want to tell a bit more. And this thing really can be done by reading, so the best outcome of this event from me will be if you would love to Google any of the names that I brought to your attention today. Thank you so much that you were here, and I'm just glad to speak about Ukrainian literature to you. Thank you so much.